Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is Carla, and this time I'm here to do a review for episode 13 of season 1 of Shadowhunters. This episode is titled Morning Star, and it's actually the season finale of season 1, or as Freeform is calling it, the spring finale, which I'm not entirely sure is any different than a season finale, like a regular season finale. I'm not entirely sure what's going to happen, like when it's going to come back or anything, because I really don't understand how seasons work on like ABC Family / Freeform. I mean, Twitter would have me believe that there are like 3 seasons of Pretty Little Liars per year, because seriously, there's a finale or a premiere every time I look at Twitter on a Pretty Little Liars day, so it's a bit confusing to me. I don't know exactly when the show is coming back. All I know is that for me, I'm calling it a season finale, so it's the season 1 finale, and it's titled Morning Star. And much like I said in my last review, I was hoping that they would end on a strong note, and I think they did, but I never expected this one to be better than the previous one, which was Malik, and I think it was pretty on point with that. I thought this episode was relatively solid. It was a good one. I don't have any major complaints. I didn't feel anything was cringy or out of place, or that there were any major problems with the dialogue or with the acting. I thought it was a solid episode. It didn't have the emotional oomph that the previous episode had, and it was a lot more about plot than about characters. So for those reasons, I tend to think of it as not as good as the previous one, and probably not as good as some of my previous favorites either, but it's a solid episode. I don't really have any major complaints. So I'm just gonna go down a bullet list that I sort of wrote down as I was watching. I've already watched it twice, and I enjoyed it both times, so it hasn't gotten any better or any worse. Not really. So yeah, I mean, the first thing that strikes me when I think back to this episode is that, like I said, there are no major problems with the acting, and as much as I've been giving flack to the acting in this show for the majority of the season, when they do it right, they do it right. I mean, when the actors are given this a decent script to work with, they can actually do really well. And I actually thought that Dominic and Catherine did really well with this episode. So I have to commend them on that. I thought they were pretty cool, pretty good. Like, there weren't any conversations between them or between them and other people where I went, she should have said this differently, he might have delivered that better. I didn't have that problem in this episode, so for me, that alone is a win. I think they've gotten a lot more comfortable in the roles through the season, and like I said, as long as they're given decent stuff to work with, I think they can actually pull it off really well. I do have some minor nitpicks with it. With the episode, like, I still don't understand why Simon is even in the institute. That shouldn't be possible. He's not supposed to be able to, stand on hallowed ground, and it's weird because I actually think they actually mentioned this before, maybe in the episode when Simon died and Raphael brought him in, and he couldn't come into the institute because it was hallowed ground, and all of a sudden you have 2 episodes of Simon just hanging at the institute. It's like, okay, I get it if you just want to do away with the whole hallowed ground thing, but then you have to make it consistent. If you first said that he can't, then he shouldn't be able to. So, that's a writing pet peeve of mine. You have to keep to your own canon. Don't just, change it whenever you need it to be different. I did find it interesting that they're sort of pulling this Maris angle toward the fact that she's angry at Alec because he chose Magnus in particular, and less at the fact that he chose a guy. Like, it's less about the fact that Alec is gay and more about the fact that Alec is with a downworlder and Magnus to add to that. Because, I mean, I feel it's missing a component in a sense, because now they're making it a bit too easy. Like, I think it would have felt a little bit more real if they actually hadn't had some objections to Magnus actually being a guy. And it would have helped a lot of people empathize with that a bit more. And also, I don't know what the heck they're going to do with Robert, because he seems so okay with it right now, and that's weird, because in the books he really wasn't okay. Like I said before, he really had a problem with it, and the problem was not with Magnus being a downworlder, it was with Magnus being a dude. So it's kind of weird in a sense, but at the same time I also like it, because I like that it reminds us that Magnus and the Lightwoods sort of have a history in a way, and the fact that Magnus likes Alec doesn't mean that he likes the rest of his family. And, you know, Maris and Robert and Magnus actually knew each other from way before Alec was even, planned. So, I think it's interesting because it does sort of remind me of that, reminds me that Maris and Robert have a history with Magnus that Alec might not have taken into account, but I can see it, Also, speaking of Robert and Maris, they're right there in the Institute. Shouldn't they be a little bit more involved? That just felt like lazy writing to me in a way. Because, come on. This is not like, oh, let's sneak out to help Clary do this one little thing that might or might not work. This is Valentine getting his hands on the Mortal Cup. All Shadowhunters should be on deck to deal with this thing. So where are Maris and Robert? Like, what is going on? Why is it only the four of them that are going after Valentine? It's so weird. I mean, see, these are the things that sort of make more sense in the book than they do in the show, because in the book, the Institute was basically desolate. It was just like Hodge and then the four of them, or the three of them in this case, because Clary hadn't arrived yet. So when Clary gets there and they're all off doing these missions with Clary or whatever, it makes sense that it's just them. But here, not only do you have an Institute full of people, but you also have Maris and Robert, who are supposedly their superiors, if not, their parents. They're also their superiors. They're right there, and they don't seem to be doing anything. So that felt really weird to me. Like, they should be more involved, so as not to fall into the cliche that the adults can't do anything. It was nice to see John Core get a chance to really show his acting chops, because he's been in the background for most of the season, so we hadn't really seen him have like an actual scene. I really liked his scene with Jace. Even before the fight, I really liked the way they spoke to each other. I thought John Core was really believable in his performance. I could see his pain. I could see his, like, why he would actually turn against the people who have been his family for so long, just because he needed his freedom so much. And I could see that. I could see the resentment for, Maris and Robert sort of behind his eyes. I really liked them. I hadn't seen John Core before in anything, so I thought he was really good in it. I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on him from this point on. As far as the main plot in Valentine getting his hands on the Mortal Cup, I'm kind of confused. I might be wrong on this because I don't actually remember the books down to the last detail, so I might be wrong on how these things worked. But I thought in the books, and by the way, this is a spoiler, just in case anybody who hasn't read the books is reading this, you might want to skip a little bit ahead. But spoiler, in the books, Valentine was not just in it for the Mortal Cup, he was actually trying to get all 3 of the mortal instruments, so that he could create a new race of Shadowhunters who would follow him and his ideals, in a way, So it seems on first glance that that's what he wants to do here, but it doesn't really make sense to me that he's already using the Mortal Cup to create Shadowhunters, because this would be the exact same race of Shadowhunters, if you know what I mean. Like, that's how Shadowhunters are born when they're not, an inherited trait. If you grab a mundane and you train him to become worthy and then have him drink from the Mortal Cup, they become a Shadowhunter. Just a regular old Shadowhunter, the same as all the Shadowhunters that we've seen so far. So the idea of him getting all the 3 mortal instruments was that it would be an entirely different race of Shadowhunters. So that he could overtake the Clave and create like his new world order or whatever. So it seems weird to me that he's using the cup already if they're trying to get to that point. I guess I just have to wait and see what they do with him in the next season, but it just seemed really weird to me that he was already turning people when he had a bunch of lackeys already there, and that everybody was so afraid of him having the Mortal Cup because he could turn people. But that's not really what he wants to do, is it? So it's kind of weird, in that sense. Also, they haven't mentioned the other mortal instruments yet at all. I guess they're going to do that when they come up in the plot, but I would have liked to see that. I thought the fight between Jace and Hodge was actually really great. I'm glad that they're finally using a decent type of visual effects for the fighting instead of that awful, like, slow-mo thing that they used before. This one, they had, like, really cool, like, beat zoom thingy that I really enjoyed, and, I like getting to see them fight because they actually do it really well. And I think when it's, when it scenes like this, when it's like 2 Shadowhunters fighting, they actually do take care with the choreography. And I thought this one was really good. And it makes sense because, Hodge is their weapons trainer, so he should be a really great fighter, right? It did make me laugh, however, when Jace pulls out the double-sided Seraph Blade. I thought it was hysterical because it's like, oh, Jace has gone Darth Maul. That is crazy. And then he cuts off Hodges' hand, and then it's even worse. It's even bigger a parallel to Star Wars, and it had me laughing. I'm not entirely sure that they did that right. It could have been a bit more dramatic so that it didn't make me laugh, but that's where my head went. I'm sorry. That said, I was very happy to see Alec and Dice finally being supportive of one another. I've been waiting for this for like the entire season, and it's so good to just see them wanting the best for the other and knowing that the other wants the best for them. It's just really great. I love their friendship. They're so great. Moving on to the other side of things, the vampire side of things. I'm glad they mentioned just the idea of sires in a way, because I don't think they had ever mentioned that Camille would become Simon's sire, and there's a bond there. So it was good for them to mention it, but I still don't like that it was Camille. You know what I mean? It's in the book it wasn't Camille, and that bond that Simon had with Raphael actually made more sense. Not like here, it's like, oh, I named you my assistant, so now you have to listen to me. And, it's like a glorified, secretary or something. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I was hoping that by the end of the season they would have some kind of, like, switcheroo, and it would turn out that Raphael was actually the one who sired Simon. Apparently not, if Camille actually thought it was her. So I don't know really where they're going with that. And although they did have a callback to that, to her being his sire, I don't think it was a big enough callback to actually warrant changing the entire plot line for Simon's transformation. You know what I mean? I almost wish it could have been Raphael, and then Simon could have just gone and looked for Camille because he wanted to help Clary. It didn't have anything to do with the sire thing. I think that would have worked better. I'm still a little weirded out by that. I don't like that change. I feel it was too big, and nothing I've seen actually merits them changing that, you know what I mean? One thing I did love, though, is Izzy coming to the rescue. I mean, Emerald, they don't actually take much care to choreograph her scenes, really, because I guess, the whip is CGI, so it's probably very difficult for her, and she's, wearing heels, so they're not gonna make her actually, fight in the scene. So her fight scenes aren't the best, but I really did love when she came in to save the day. It was perfect because she's walking out, because Raphael is always like adios with everybody, and then Isabel comes in, light bursts into the room so they can get away, and Raphael's on the other side of the light, and she's like adios, and I love that. I'm usually not a great fan of fangirl Spanish just added into the shows for no reason, but I actually really liked it in this circumstances, because all I can think of is, yes, Emerald's native language is Spanish, so I thought it was just excellent that they had her actually do that, even if it doesn't necessarily mean that Izzy speaks any Spanish other than adios. But I thought it was really cool. Also, when they get to, speaking of lines that I loved, when they get to Magnus's place, so that he can draft up the document for Camille, they're talking, right? And Clary's explaining stuff, and there's a back and forth, and then Isabel is just like, yeah, I'm gonna call for backup, and then she goes off. And as soon as she said that, I'm like, backup? No, hell no, you're gonna call your brother to come get this bitch of his boyfriend, man. I thought it was so great. Just the way she delivered it, she could see Alec needs to be here, right now. Because somebody has to control Camille and get her off Magnus, okay? I thought that was fantastic. One thing that I didn't like, and this is going to sound so superficial on my part, I'm sure it will, but it really bothers me when they over curl Clary's hair, because Isabel, I can see her curling her hair really fast before leaving the institute for a mission. I can see that happening. I don't have any problem with Emerald's hair, but Clary should have better priorities than curling her hair. So I guess the idea is for us to think that her hair is actually naturally curly. But I like the soft curls. I think those could be very natural, but then at parts of this episode, they actually had her hair really curled. She had almost corkscrew curls. And in parts when she was talking about Simon, with Simon about Jocelyn and how much Jocelyn loves him and whatever, her hair was really curly, and it took me out of the scene entirely. They need to be better about that. Maybe don't curl Clary's hair so much, because she's not, obviously she's not ugly or anything, but she wouldn't prioritize curling her hair over a mission, so it just takes me out entirely. That said, I have to say, and I'm surprised by this myself, I love Camille in this show. It's kind of mind-blowing because in the books, I cannot stand Camille. Seriously, she just grates on me so much. And everything that happens, not just in this book, but in the next few books with her, just annoys the heck out of me, and I can't stand her. But something about just the sass and the glee that Caitlin Lieb puts into this character in the show. I just love her so much, okay? And I can totally believe that she and Magnus would have a thing, which is another thing that I usually don't like from the books. Like, every time the fact that Magnus and Camille had a thing is mentioned in the books, I just cringe because I hate to think about that. But in the TV show, I can totally see it happening because they both have that, like, sass, and I really love it. And I love Caitlin Lieb, and I can't believe she's making me love Camille. I mean, when she calls Simon my little caramel, I died. I basically died, okay? I love that so much. I love her. I love her. Mad props to her, because I didn't think anybody could make me love Camille. Also, and speaking of Camille and, you know, trying to get back with Magnus over Alex, when she kisses him and then, you know, Alec and Izzy come in, and there's this whole argument about, you know, why Magnus drafting this document had to include a kiss and whatever, and Camille's like, yeah, because your thing won't last, and then Izzy's like, say that again and you won't last. And oh my god, I love that so much. It was so great. I mean, Protective Izzy is the best thing that can happen to these, you know, in these books. It's one of my favorite things in the whole world, and I love the way that Emerald delivered that line. It was so perfect. She had a lot of great lines in this episode. Then we get to, like, the ending of the episode, and that's when I start feeling weird, in a way, because and I mentioned this in my previous review, there's so many plot points that they're bringing in right now that in the books don't even happen until, like, the third or fourth books, and it's weird to me. Not that I mind them changing things, because some of them I can understand, like waking Jocelyn up. Yeah, you don't want to like pay Maxim Roy to be asleep for an entire season, right? Because she, in the books, and this is a spoiler again, in the books she doesn't wake up until, like, book 3. I think it's the end of book 3, really. So that would be like season 3, and you don't want to pay her to have her asleep for the entire season. But now that's going to create problems of the Maris and Robert type, because you're going to have an entire plot line following book 2 where the kids or the teenagers are the ones doing things, and while Jocelyn is there and awake, she's not really helping. I guess I'm not entirely sure how they're going to fix things so that it makes sense for her not to be involved, you know. And I don't want them to be like Maris and Robert in this episode, where it just felt lazy. It's like, oh yeah, we don't need to include them, whatever. I don't want it to be like that. So that makes me really curious. And also, this whole thing about Alec worrying about how Magnus is immortal, that doesn't happen until, what, the 4th or 5th book? That's a long time coming, like a really long time coming, for him to actually be worrying about that. I mean, they haven't even gone on their first date yet, and he's already wondering, you know, what's gonna happen when he gets old and Magnus doesn't. Like, that's it. It's not realistic to me. So I feel like they're pushing that, and while I don't mind, because I like the drama and I liked that in the 4th book, so I don't really mind that we're seeing it now. At the same time, it just makes me think that maybe they were like, oh shoot, we need to ensure that we get a next season, so we're going to, like, pad this with as much stuff as we can from future books so that people have something to look forward to, and, you know, we're that desperate that we're just going to add stuff at random and deal with the fallout later. So it's like, I don't know, it's weird. I don't necessarily mind that they're pushing things forward so early, but again, it makes me scared that they're only doing it to, like, leave us with a cliffhanger, and I don't want them to have cliffhangers just for the sake of it. Also, there are some things that they did backward, like Jace. This whole thing about him not being sure and you know, being taking Valentine's side. It did happen in the books, but it happened before. It happened at Renwick's, or like after their encounter at Renwick's, I guess, or before, I don't know. It was during Renwick's. So it would have been during episode 11, I guess. And then at the end of the book, then Clary gets him to, come back to their side and realize that Valentine isn't good, and that Valentine, just because Valentine raised him doesn't mean that he has to be with Valentine and take his side. So in here they did it backwards. I can only assume it was because they needed to have him there at the wedding, and they didn't want him to be with Valentine at that point, so they had to do it backwards, and also because they wanted to have this cliffhanger here where we all think that Jace has gone evil when he really isn't. He's just confused. So that was interesting. I don't expect him to be on Valentine's side for too long next season, I guess. I'm pretty sure he will come back into the Shadowhunters fold by like the first episode, because they do have to keep going with the plot of City of Ashes, and that implies that Jace has to come back to his friends at some point really early on. I'm just wondering, I mean, there's a lot of things where I just am like, why did they do it this way? I don't necessarily mind. I don't think they're bad choices per se. I just wish I knew why, and how they're going to move forward after making those changes. I do have to say about the last part with Valentine, when he actually called Jace to him. Him capturing all of Jace and Clary's friends was a little bit too easy. I mean, they're supposed to be better than that, I guess. I don't know, it was just a little bit too... I mean, Magnus could have done something, right? He's a warlock. He doesn't really need to... He could have just moved his hand. It seemed a little bit too easy for how we've seen them fight before. Like, they could have done something. They could have tried to get out of the hold or whatever. It just seemed too easy. But the show does that a lot, so... What can I say? And as melodramatic as the portal scene was, when Jace was actually going through the portal with Valentine, and Clary was behind going, Jace, what are you doing? As melodramatic as it was, I actually really liked it. I thought that Clary's fear and pain actually felt real. It didn't feel too much. Maybe it was the fact that it was in slow-mo and we didn't actually hear her say any of it. But I really liked it, and I liked Dom's when he looks back at her, it really hit me in the heart. So I like that scene, and props to Kat and props to Dom, because they pulled it off really well. A scene that could have been otherwise really cheesy, And as far as the end goes, it's good to see that Simon isn't pulling the moves on Clary straight away, because I was afraid they would do that. I was afraid that he would try to kiss her or ask her out or something in this episode, because he seemed so hyped up about her and Jace not being able to be together, being brother and sister, and I thought that came off as a little jerkish. So your best friend is suffering, you should be thinking of her rather than yourself. So I'm glad that they didn't do that with Simon. Anyway, I've been talking about this for way too long. So I'm just gonna say I liked the season finale. I thought it was okay. I thought it was a solid episode. I don't have any major complaints. Everything I've been ranting about for the last half hour, those are minor complaints. I can still watch this episode and not feel that it's terrible and actually be entertained by it. So I enjoyed the finale. I didn't like it as much as I did the previous episode or a few of the other episodes through the season, but I thought it was solid. It was okay. There were really no problems with the script. I thought it was okay, and the performances were great. And I enjoyed it. I thought it was okay. I'm really wondering how they're going to do certain plot points that should be up to come in season 2. But I guess they'll just have to figure it out, right? I guess we'll see whenever season 2 comes. I don't know when that will be because I don't understand ABC Family's, renewal patterns. So whenever that is, I'll be watching again because I really, the show it's been very inconsistent. It's had its ups and downs. It's had its episodes that I absolutely hated it and thought were a huge pile of crap. And it's had some episodes that I thought were really amazing. Like genuinely amazing, not just amazing for this show, but actually good. So overall, I think I can look back on this season and say that I enjoyed it. I do like how they're doing their adaptations for the most part. I think it's relatively faithful to the books, or at least faithful in a way that I can understand, and that doesn't make me feel like, oh, I'm watching something completely different. It still feels like the Mortal Instruments. So that's what I like about this, and that's what's gonna keep me coming back. I think it's a decent adaptation. I certainly like it better than the movie, and you can see the progress of all the actors from the beginning to the end. They've gotten really better. The dialogue has gotten better. The scripts have gotten better. The effects have gotten better. Just the cinematography has got better. So I think there's a good chance that season 2 might actually be even better than this one. So I'm gonna keep watching, and I'm actually really satisfied with this season as far as adaptations go. So I'm happy about that, and I'm just gonna stop speaking right now because it's been way too long. I'm going to be talking long enough that this could be a whole episode of something. Anyway, yep, that's my review. As usual, be sure to visit our website, thegeekypub.com. We have reviews not just for the previous episodes of Shadowhunters, but also for other TV shows, books, games, movies. We have a ton of stuff in there, so be sure to visit and check it out. And while you're there, do remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel because that's usually where our reviews go up first. Most of the time, even before they hit the website, they're up on YouTube. So if you don't want to miss anything we upload, then you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also, if you guys like my reviews and like the stuff that I talk about, then you can find me on Twitter at girlsareweird and Tumblr at girlsareweird. That's underscores between each letter. And also, I sort of kind of read the endings of books and sort of review them and tell you what I think about them at my YouTube channel called Bookending. That's bookend.i.ng. So you can find me over there if you like to hear me talking about books and just feeling the feels when it comes to the ending of books. And that's it for me today. I'll see you guys in my next review. Bye.